We are live.
Welcome to A Thunder's Applause, a podcast where two friends get together and discuss the news and events that will shape our uncertain future. I am your host, Steve, along with my co-host, Zach. How are you doing?
Doing pretty good. Just reading about white balloons in the sky. I thought it was going to be red balloons that caused the war. 99 of them, to be exact.
Oh, 90, that's where the joke came from. Okay. I didn't quite understand it when you texted it. I was like, red balloon? Is that like a Red China kind of joke? No. Is that a song or something?
Yeah, 99 red Luftballons. It's a German song that was really, really poppy. 99 red Luftballons.
You should definitely cue that up, and we'll end the show on that.
And then we will get copyright hit in a second.
Oh, will we?
I might have just got us hit right there.
At any rate, we're doing a kind of impromptu Friday night stream. Try and keep it brief for everyone and for ourselves mostly because we matter more than you do. No, I'm just
I got
kidding.
shit to do, bro.
Got shit to do. I fucking drink cocktails and smoke weed.
And watch stuff.
And
watch other people that aren't me talking about things.
Anyway, we're coming. What's that?
I said important things.
Right, the important things.
Like,
one of the important things that we're doing tonight is discussing this fucking balloon that has people, and I say people, I mean the media freaking out. When I pulled up the feed here that I'll show in a little bit later on my phone about an hour ago, dude, there was like 5 different news stations like streaming it, and they had been streaming it for hours. So it's like
24-hour news cycle.
Yeah, dude, it's just like nonstop and like, why might they do that? Why might they want everybody to believe that China is like doing something so nefarious that we need to go to war with them? I don't know.
Is it because China has resources that are nice and we want them?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're not going to really get into the reasons entirely because a lot of it's economic.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it ultimately is that China holds so much U.S. debt and we're not going to be able to repay it.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to find a workaround and not having to fucking pay off our debt.
If you can get the rest of the world pissed off at them and blow them up, then there you go.
Right. I mean, that's my suspicion is when you unpack it all boils down to the U.S. is looking at debt default at some point in the not too distant future, and China holds most of that debt. So, but who the fuck knows? A lot of it is just like this shift to multipolarity. It's just a great powers theory conflict, whatever. At any rate, we are talking about this balloon tonight because it's fresh in people's minds. It happened like fucking today, I think, right? Like, homie saw the balloon earlier today.
When you told me to look at it, I was most of the articles were less than 5 hours old.
Yeah, like just happened this afternoon. Over the Midwest, some kid, they've interviewed him, and it's not really relevant. I don't think we included that interview with the guy who first saw it. Apparently, there's been several balloons, and the Pentagon hasn't said anything because they weren't worried about it.
Yeah.
But now that this guy brought it forward to like the local news or whoever and like reported it to the sheriff or however it happened.
Yeah.
Now it's spread and you're seeing this kind of mob mentality process like of manufacturing consent, which most people who would come across this would be familiar with the concept of manufacturing consent, which is how government and the media sell lies to the public, sell wars. Yellow journalism, it was called at one point, right? When we, all sorts of conflicts that something completely reasonable, given context happened, but it gets so slanted and then just repeated over and over and over that it whips like the public into a frenzy and provides cover to the politicians who want to deploy these military resources because it benefits their fucking donors.
Yeah,
right? Like,
it makes money for the various arms manufacturers.
Yeah, which has been a constant subject on this show. And, we primarily focus on like the collapse of industrial society, but part of that is the decline of the American Empire, um,
Yep.
and its military adventurism, which is like so parallel to past civilizational collapses that like you can't help but notice it, right?
Oh, I mean, it's like we got a hold of the playbook and we're like, yeah, yeah, follow
For
this.
sure.
Mm.
So we're going to try and burn through some of this quickly to introduce it. We're going to briefly look at the illusory truth effect, or also known as the big lie, which some people might be familiar with. Then we're going to look at a statement from China and see what they said about it. The Minister of Foreign Affairs spokesperson over there. Then we're going to briefly discuss what high altitude balloons are, because it should be relevant to a fucking conversation about a high altitude balloon.
Because apparently we have to talk about that.
Because apparently we should tell you what the fucking balloon is before you start eating up all the fucking war propaganda.
I started reading the article, and so many of the people that they were talking to in Montana were like, I should have shot that thing down. And it's like, the farthest you can really get a rifle bullet is like 75 to 8,000 feet up in the air. And these things are like 60,000 feet up in the air. So the
Yeah.
best they could have hoped for was like the bullet didn't come back down and shoot them. And if it had have, I bet they would have claimed that the balloon was shooting bullets at them.
Yeah,
That's
people are dumb.
yeah.
But those are the kinds of people who might be willing to take their kids down to the recruiting station and sign them
So,
up to get
yeah.
fucking butchered on some island in the Pacific.
Yeah. Sign me up for that war. Yeah.
Sign me up to get butchered. Okay,
Too
great.
much.
And then I'm just going to do a quick survey of headlines, because
Okay.
that's really what jumped out at me, why we even put this together, because I was like, holy shit, I'm scrolling because I wanted to know more about it. I heard about it or whatever, and I'm like
Yeah.
scrolling headlines, and it's like just oppressive. We'll show you.
And we're at your feed now.
What's up?
We're on your feed now. So you can start on the illusion.
Oh, great. Okay, I was just doing a summary real quick.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Then we're going to see what the U.S. Defense Department spokesperson says, and then we're going to watch a couple videos about generally the China-U.S. happenings, which kind of set some of the context for today. So we're going to start with this article here from Scientific American. We're not going to cover a lot of it, but I wanted to just put this stuff in folks' minds, right? Like, let's center our analysis on these ideas, because as we go through this, you can kind of see moral panic is another concept, right? Like, where it's not really real, but like it's real to the people who believe it.
Right.
How do you pronounce that? I always thought it sounds like it has an R, even though it doesn't, like Goebbels or something like that.
Yeah, I keep hearing people say Goebbels or Gables sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this guy, Goebbels or whatever, was the minister of propaganda for Hitler, right? Like, and he's well known as like a really effective communicator and propagandist. And he had this fairly well known quote: "If you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it." And Scientific American goes on to say, this phenomenon, pervasive in contemporary politics, advertising, and social media, is known in cognitive psychology as the illusory truth effect. Am I zoomed in on this well enough?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So then they discuss how the study was set up, and I'm not going to read through that. Participants, all that stuff. Another one I wanted to draw attention to is, even though the illusory truth effect was much more easily observed in the middle of the plausibility spectrum, meaning things that could seem reasonable, not like something that's known as fact and something that is known as falsehood, right? The
Right.
kinds of things that are like, oh yeah, that's believable, that's possible. Even though the illusory truth effect was much more easily observed in the middle of the plausibility spectrum than at either extreme, the data did not suggest a significant asymmetry in the relationship between plausibility and the magnitude of the illusory truth effect. In other
Mm.
words, the results were consistent with a consistent boost to belief across all levels of plausibility.
Yeah, and hence you go back to the, lie big, because eventually people will believe it.
Right. Right. And the thing is here with this, and why I wanted to draw attention to this statement in particular, um, is because that idea that the middle of the plausibility, right? Like even the middle of the plausibility spectrum is skewed by the illusory truth effect,
Hmm.
right? So like when pundits on mainstream news outlets and politicians are constantly like, oh, China's this big bad evil, China's this big
Yeah,
bad evil, you can say the Chinese are provoking an act or have committed an act of war because of a balloon, high altitude balloon, that comes across to the public as a plausible explanation,
right.
right? It's a spy balloon, and that seems plausible because we've painted China as our mortal enemy for at least since Obama did the pivot to Asia, right? In
Right.
preparation for this. You're gonna say something?
I was going to say, that we were talking, it's like before we started, about all the articles, like even by the time I got to it, only 5 hours after it started, were immediately in the headlines calling it Chinese spy balloon, and just repeating that over and over again, even though there was no direct evidence, only a strong suspicion of it. And so that's already normalized it in a lot of readers' minds, that that's what it is.
Yeah, you can see my screen, correct?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so this is what we're talking about. We'll just move this up in the tracker. We'll just tackle
yeah,
this now
yeah,
since we're
yeah,
talking about it.
yeah.
Um, Pentagon tracking. Now they're using language like suspected or alleged, which is
Alleged, yeah,
nice because like an hour and a half ago, when I was like, holy shit, they didn't have the word suspected or
right,
alleged.
yeah.
It was Pentagon tracking Chinese spy balloon,
Hmm.
right? Um, Latest on the Chinese spy balloon. Is there a Chinese spy balloon? Like people are searching this.
Where is the spy balloon now?
Where is the spy balloon
That
now?
just accepts that it is a spy balloon.
And then you have these reactions. We're not going to cover this, but here it is in headline: Blinken scraps Beijing trip.
That one doesn't make any sense to me. This is the time when you want to go talk.
Right. And this is cover for the US severing, further severing
Mm.
diplomatic ties. If you remember, we discussed a while ago the Trump tariffs.
Yeah,
China, in response, like basically exited all of these bilateral and multilateral uh, conferences, basically, where like representatives from the different countries got together to discuss issues like fucking climate change, right? Outside of the IPCC process.
right.
There were discussions independently of that between representatives of each state, and China pulled themselves from that after the Trump tariffs. And so this balloon thing just provides cover for them further withdrawing diplomatically because they want to go to war, because Anthony Blinken's fucking kids and grandkids are not going to be sent to be slaughtered on islands in the South Pacific. Mark my
No,
fucking words.
no, of course not.
No, they're probably going to fucking be in their preparatory schools or in some Ivy League college somewhere.
Yeah. Oh, I'm studying to be a
If they're
doctor,
not
so I
already
can't go to
serving on the
war.
board. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I said I'm studying to be a doctor. I can't possibly be sent to war. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and if they're already in their careers, they're probably on the board of some gigantic corporation somewhere.
Yeah.
Um, Suspected Chinese spy balloon, Chinese spy balloon is weather device, says Beijing,
Hmm.
which is probably the most honest, except that it calls it a Chinese spy balloon
Yeah.
instead of what we're saying. Is it like, is it a spy balloon or is it a weather balloon? Like, let's talk about it. Anyway, that's it. You just keep seeing this. Chinese reconnaissance balloon is actually also fairly benign. Chinese spy balloon live. I was telling you before we got on this call, like when I first was looking at this just a couple hours ago, dude, there was like fucking 5 different media outlets that had been like live coverage of this thing for hours.
Yeah.
So it's hooking people at their dinner hour when they got the fucking news on, and it's nonstop. We're just gonna keep talking about this, Chinese spy balloon. And then there's opportunities. You're seeing interviews come up, and I'm sure more will come up over the next several days
Oh yeah.
with like
Yeah.
CIA spooks and stuff coming on as the experts, right? Being like, oh,
Right.
China's provoking us. It's
A,
fucking
a whole
crazy.
lot of it'll be a whole lot of former this and former that, you know, gives interview about Chinese spy balloon, and you'll just have
Right, exactly.
yeah.
Former State Department official.
That's how it always goes too. And you can
Yep.
always find one who's willing to fucking, sell himself out.
And so here's YouTube, and we were discussing also before we started the show how my algorithm on my phone is so much different than my desktop and it's probably because I watch like prepper videos and shit on my phone. And so
Yeah.
like it had the most like scary sounding headlines. Because then when I opened it up on desktop, I was like, oh, okay, these headlines aren't that big of a deal. But dude, I'm telling you, like
You got to look up more doom porn on your desktop.
on my desk, I just don't use my desktop much. Most people, I think, are like me and utilize their mobile devices for
Yeah.
most, entertainment slash information. But here you go. China claims balloon over Montana is just for weather research. Like, look at even how that's fucking phrased. It's like
Oh,
dismissive, right?
like that word just is carrying a lot of weight in that sentence.
Right. And that's a news station, granted, possibly a local news station, but
Yeah.
like,
Well, they all get their information from the same
yeah,
place
it's all
anyway.
coming down from corporate headquarters.
Yeah.
Chinese spy balloon will not be shot down, which of course is like, why aren't they shooting it down? Why aren't they? Because the Pentagon is probably aware that I mean, they are aware that it's nothing.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and a lot of them were like, "Oh, the same people were like, "Oh, I should have shot it down." Well, no, you can't. But then, they were like, "Why isn't the government shooting it down?" And the government came out and said, "Oh, well, we're worried that if we shoot it down, what about the fallout? We don't want to, injure anybody." And one of the funnier things I saw was the person they were interviewing was like, "Man, there's more cows than people here. They must be more worried about hitting a cow than a person." And it's like, you don't have to use an explosive device to take down one of these
no,
balloons.
you see,
You just
put
send
a
a couple of
single
rounds
bullet
through
through
it.
the fucking balloon.
Yeah, and it'll slowly make its way to the ground. Yeah,
Right.
and then you can recover Chinese technology. Ooh, ah.
Yeah. And we find out it's like a fucking a barometer and like a hydrometer or whatever.
You know,
It's just for pressure
released
and
by
temperature and shit.
yeah, released by some like rich Chinese kid who's like, I want to do an experiment.
Or even not. So I saw tweets and I did watch one of those live streams like briefly. Um, I don't know why. I just wanted to see what people were saying in the live chat, which of course they're like,
Self-flagellation,
what's that?
self-flagellation.
Yeah, the people in the chat are all fucking gung ho for war with China. Probably most of them are fucking white haired, old fucking white liberal ladies, like whatever. Um, their kids aren't going to go get slaughtered either. Um, and I saw tweets from like Mitch McConnell being like, we have to respond with force to this provocation.
Yeah,
And here's a congressman calls for a statement. Now that's fairly benign, but of course, why what does he want the statement to be, right? Like he's like
right.
Biden needs to come out hard against China is what it is, right? Um Chinese spy balloon, blah blah blah. Right. So I wanted to go to back to this tab. This is the first article I looked at, and this is part of the reason why I wanted to do this show. Pentagon tracking suspected spy balloon. And then you scroll down. Um, I should have probably had the right article pulled up. I'm pretty sure this is the right one. Okay. Well, I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but basically the military said that like honestly like it looks like it's a spy balloon,
Hmm.
but they said but it's not gathering any information that they can't already get from fucking satellites.
Right. And you could pull up, and in fact, I will because I want to. You can pull up, Google Maps and see that you can see so much crap from Google Maps. This is a zoomed out view of the Air Force base that they're so worried about, and you can just zoom in, and you can zoom in a little bit more, and you can start to see
Yeah.
buildings, and you can see, a fire department, and you can see a fire truck, and you could see cars, and if there were people in these cars, you could almost, or like people walking from the cars, you could almost tell that there were people walking from the cars. And this is from satellite. And if you think China doesn't have satellites that are, you know, relatively this capable,
Or can't use Google.
yeah, or do not fucking use Google, yeah, you got another thing coming, guys.
Did
Like,
did
look,
did I tell you about that Vice article? This is a short aside.
yeah, go
There
ahead.
was a little Vice video. Vice had a little investigative piece where like two journalists basically were able to identify a hangar on a US airbase in Belgium where nuclear weapons were stored based on like um figuring out which search terms to search for,
Hmm.
and then finding someone who posted a fucking picture of their military unit. And then they looked at the picture and they're like, "Oh, it's hard to tell." And then they're like, "Oh, look at that. There's a flag on the bumper of that car that's a fucking." I'm sorry, I said Belgium, it's the Netherlands. That's the Netherlands flag. And then so then they went to that, okay, that's the airbase where we thought there were nukes. Okay, these guys are a nuke unit posted in front of a bomb in front of a
Yeah, yeah,
hangar
yeah,
that has a Netherlands flag. And then they went to that base, and based on like features they could see in the background of the picture, they were
yeah,
able to fucking look at a satellite image like you were just looking at and go all the way down and be like, yeah, this bunker has a fucking aircraft that can carry a nuclear weapon,
yeah.
and it's right here. And we figured that out with just fucking publicly available information.
It harkens back to, I believe it was Shia LaBeouf, like, you released like a short video of him, and Redditors figured out where he was in like less than an hour. So I'm pretty sure that, China's got a spy industry that's a little bit more capable than Redditors. So yeah,
Yeah, 100%, dude, 100%. So at any rate, I did want to draw attention to that. I'm sorry. You had a map up, right?
uh, I did. I
Yeah,
read
I
it.
just wanted to point out this statement here. That the Pentagon says, spokesperson said that the balloon was traveling at an altitude well above commercial air traffic
Hmm.
and does not present a military or physical threat to people on the ground. In a
Right.
later clip, you'll hear how, or in all these clips, we want people to understand that when they say, oh, it's violating US territorial sovereignty
Hmm.
because it was in our airspace. By law, technically, airspace goes to flight level 600, which is 60,000 feet.
Okay. So there's a path.
Commercial air traffic um, is generally never above 42,000 feet.
Okay.
So this says they acknowledge it's well above commercial air traffic.
Hmm.
So if it's in US airspace, technically, we're talking about like a few thousand fucking feet. Because if it's
Yeah.
above 42,000 but below 60,000, it's
Hmm.
well above 42 but somehow still within 60,000.
And that is an 18,000 foot gap. But yeah, yeah, I get what you're getting
Right,
at.
but it says well above, so I'm
Yeah.
assuming it's, you know, at least another
Right.
10,000 above that, right?
Yeah.
Because the separation standards at that altitude, due to like signal degradation and stuff, there's a higher separation standard.
Hmm.
Um, and so I think separation at those altitudes is like 5,000 feet.
Okay.
So if they said well above, then they're probably meaning at least five, probably
Okay.
10,000 feet above. And we're talking about, so they're within 10, they're in the top 10,000 feet of our airspace. So what is that, like 6.5%?
Yeah.
Right? Or
Yeah.
yeah, something like
Yeah.
that.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So like if it is it like a grotesque violation of our territorial sovereignty if it's barely like clipping the fucking top
And,
extent of it?
and that's the question: is some of the things I've seen said 60,000 was where it was, and so it's like 60,001, 59,999. Are you going to start a war over a foot or two?
I mean, we have, right? Remember
Yeah.
the Mexican-American War when we fucking stole that? There's a tiny sliver of California, like in the Imperial. You remember the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo?
Yeah.
You remember that shit?
Not well, I'll say that.
Dude, it was like, I don't know, it was like 80 mile. I don't know the exact dimensions, but on a map, it looks insignificant, but it was
Yeah.
a little fucking sliver of land, which just happens to be a fairly productive agricultural region.
That makes all the difference. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure the other reasons about that. That wasn't something that really interested me. But at any rate, we can move on to a little video about high altitude balloons.
Okay.
Oh, no, wait, we're doing the world news statement. I'm sorry, dude.
Yeah.
Thanks.
我注意到有关报道正在了解核实情况。我想强调的是，在事实搞清楚之前，猜测和炒作无异于问题的妥善解决。中国是负责任的国家，一贯严格遵守国际法，无意侵犯任何主权国家的领土和领空。关于这个气球的问题，刚刚我已经讲了，我们正在了解核实情况，希望双方能够共同冷静谨慎处理。
As we know, Secretary Blinken.
Yeah, turn this off. But again, right, senior international defense researcher. So I'm not sure where global news comes from. I didn't have a chance to find out who funds them.
Yeah.
But it kind of comes across as like a establishment or think tank media. And then they got that neocon on there, who says the same thing as someone else in a clip from Forbes a little later. So we're not going to include that here.
Yeah.
But basically says the exact same thing. It's just like, oh, that's a provocation, blah, blah, blah. But when you saw the spokesperson from the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, she was basically saying, we don't have a track record of violating people's territorial sovereignty.
Yeah,
we don't want to. And can we all just calm the fuck down until we figure out what's going on?
Yeah, shit happens. Systems break down. And then the balloon skirts another country's airspace. Whoopsie-doo.
I saw elsewhere that, that they're basically like, it's a balloon. It doesn't have a lot of control. It's in the jet stream and it's cruising. Yeah. And actually, I saw something different that said the balloon was over Canada. And I'm like, yeah, that would make absolute sense if it's over the far northern US and the freaking jet stream.
Yeah.
You don't
hear Canada talking about this.
I haven't checked the Canadian news, but if it crossed and that's how those borders don't matter, dude. And you said somewhere you saw they said it was at 60,000 feet.
Yeah. That was what was being reported by the Pentagon.
Yeah, then that means it's like at the top of our airspace. It's not even in our fucking airspace.
Yeah. But
then again, is anybody looking at those headlines or getting in that live chat being like, fuck China? Are any of those thinking? Does anybody know that we don't get to control the whole fucking globe? Like that our airspace has an upper limit to it?
I'm pretty sure if you told them that there are Chinese satellites above America, they'd be like, that's a war crime.
Even though I don't know, dude. It's fucking crazy. It's definitely troubling, and that's the only reason we put this together when, spontaneously on a Friday night. Let's move on to the next one. Now we're talking about weather balloons.
Now we're talking about the science of weather balloons.
Today, balloons are used for a number of different purposes, including measuring weather and atmospheric conditions, planetary research, engineering education, photography, videography, pollution monitoring, and some are just for fun. The U.S. National Weather Service alone launches 70,000 weather balloons each year, generally 2 to 3 times a day from airports and weather stations across the country. This method of reaching the stratosphere is so cost-effective that some people call high-altitude ballooning the poor man's space program.
So, that's what it is. Yeah, tell me about that.
I mean,
you like space.
Yeah, no, these balloons are used all over the place for a whole variety of things. Bigger ones have been used to carry telescopes. Not with a great amount of success, but they wanted to try it out. They're like, hey, like currently we're flying planes in high altitude using that, with telescopes mounted to them to get over like most of the atmosphere and get rid of those atmospheric aberrations. And they're like, can we just float it on a balloon and save ourselves a lot of fuel? No is the answer. It moves too much. But they tried, and like that's the sort of stuff that these balloons get used for. And like if a weather balloon from one of the 70,000 that we launch every year came down in another country, they're going to start declaring that we're violating their airspace? No, they're probably going to be like, oh look, a malfunction, let's try to return it to its owner, or
yeah. And later in this, I think this Overlook Horizon, the people who put this up, I think they have a company where they sell high altitude photography, because he talks about the equipment that's on it, and later we're not going to cover that, but he basically is like, and then you have like a reward or return label. We always try and retrieve it, but in the event that we don't, like, and it's like the NOAA or whoever else that's doing the weather satellites, like, or the weather monitoring, atmospheric condition monitoring, they drop their stuff all the time, because I guess like a lot of them, they'll go up and they're designed to, like, when they hit a certain pressure or something, they blow up and then parachute down.
And that is and that's just to stop them from going too far or doing anything crazy, where they might get into trouble like this.
And so the Pentagon says it's basically at the very top of our airspace, 60,000 feet.
Mm-hmm.
And then they said, was it NOAA that he said launches at least 70,000 a year?
Can't remember if he said who. I think he just said that weather organizations.
Okay. Yeah. And I'm imagining if they launch 70,000 weather balloons a year just out of the United States, and how many other balloons are going up, like, and I think you made that point, like, China's probably putting up tens of thousands of balloons. So when they say, oh, that's a weather balloon that got away from us.
Yeah.
Like, and so to me, like, it feels like this happened. As I understand it, it's happened before, and the Pentagon never made a big deal about it.
Yeah.
But I'm sure this kid reported it. Somebody saw it, some politician saw a tweet, and then they're the ones that are like, we have to, like, whether it's political theater and they want to show Biden is weak because he's not going to fucking tell China to fuck off, or I don't know their motivations, but certainly it being a weather balloon is absolutely entirely plausible and probably likely. But instead, they're trying to manufacture consent and create the illusory truth effect, or the big lie, by calling it a spy satellite or a spy balloon in every fucking headline that you see.
Yup.
It's fucking insane, dude.
Then we can go to war and poor people can die. And then it won't be as much of us, to work jobs, so we can demand higher wages. Damn it.
No, they're just gonna fucking automate. They're automating us out of existence, and then they need to purge the surplus population because they don't need us to do useful work.
Yeah.
And by virtue of our existence, like, we're taking resources from them, right? Not resources that we create with our labor or with our minds, or with our ancestors and our legacy, right? Like, it's not, nope, it's just why did the ruling class put their wealth in our subsistence, right? Like, the kind of whole, like, why did Iraq put our oil under their sand?
Our oil under their sand, yeah. I love that one.
All right, we're moving on to the next clip, which looks like the defense press briefing. Let's see what the U.S. Defense Department has to say now that they've been largely goaded into going along with it.
Hell yeah.
Location, I can tell you that the balloon continues to move eastward and is currently over the center of the continental United States. Again, we currently assess that the balloon does not present a military or physical threat to people on the ground at this time, and we'll continue to continue to monitor and review options. Finally, Secretary Austin will host a bilateral meeting today here in the Pentagon with Australian Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Defense Richard Marles. The Secretary looks forward to discussing bilateral defense cooperation and our mutual security efforts within the Indo-Pacific region and beyond. A full readout of the engagement will post later today to defense.gov. And with that, we'll go ahead and move to your questions. We'll start with.
Yeah.
So I think we were going to play the first question, correct?
Well, if it starts in a minute 30 seconds, yes. Otherwise,
okay, so
but we absolutely can.
I wanted to pause there, I think.
Oh, okay.
Because he talks about they're still going forward with bilateral security discussions with Australia.
Mm-hmm.
What is Australia is an Anglophone country.
Yeah.
In the region with a modern military.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to discuss regional security. Right? Like,
I mean, they're within a few thousand. They're closer than we are. That's for fucking sure.
I mean, remember last week we didn't even fucking talk about it on Monday. Mm-hmm. Or maybe we did. I don't recall. It was so long ago. 3 or 4 days. U.S. official went and met with the Israeli government, and then like the next fucking day, Israel bombed weapons manufacturing plants in Iran. And so it's like, what are we like? We're literally going around and talking to our allies and being like, this is what we need from you because this is what we're doing.
It would be a shame if someone bombed that. Wink, wink.
Oh, sure. Nice drone factory you have there. It'd be a shame if someone bombed it.
With a drone.
Nice wedding party there.
Oh, God.
It'd be a real shame if we drone bombed you.
Blew up most of your family. Yeah.
Oh, that was another thing that
real events, people. Real events that happened.
Right. I was going to say,
guy getting cut in half by fucking Hellfire missiles. He was a contractor.
I wish it wasn't.
I wish it wasn't
true. Yeah, I meant to say when the spokesperson from the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, was on, and she's talking about not violating. We don't have a habit or whatever of violating, territorial sovereignty and all that shit.
Yeah,
and
international law.
In international law, and I'm just like, if China really wanted to up, they'd do like a North Korea thing and or some of the Latin American elected leaders down there where they're like, fuck America, or even Putin does, right? Yeah. So you got no fucking room to talk when it comes to the moral fucking high ground, you pieces of shit. You blew up the Middle East. You blew it up.
Outside of their own territory, like the worst thing I could think they do is they don't respect intellectual product. That's about it. Like, internationally, they're just like, nah, if you could just send us over some of your microchip manufacturers so we can talk to them, that'd be great. And we're like, yeah, no problem. We'll get a whole manufacturing thing down there. You can talk to them. And then 4 years later, it's like, man, these chips that China's producing sure look a lot like the ones that we're producing. That's weird.
That's weird. Yeah, but I also understand that because corporate espionage has been a thing since the beginning of corporations, right? Like, you try and steal the things that give your competitors edges because rather than a cooperative economy that's based around providing the most good to the most people, right? A basic standard of living for all. Instead, we have a system that's based on competition until you murder each other and then one person stands on top of the pile of bodies, right?
And then monopolizes everything and stops making
and then
progress.
They have absolute control and can charge whatever they want and deliver it with as shitty customer service as they want.
Yep. I mean, with reference to the microchip things, Intel got to the head of the game and then sat on its heels for fucking 8 years, I think, before they made any real progress. And it took someone else coming in and slapping them upside the head, with a better product for them to do anything about it. So if you want to see what happens when you get, rid of competition, that's what happens is you just sit there and you do nothing.
Yeah.
But the same by the same standard, I disagree with the idea that no competition in a dog eat dog world would lead to no progress.
Yeah, right. No, yeah, and that's a whole nother subject we can get into. Like,
Yeah.
It stifles innovation, and in a lot of ways, like, there's plenty of evidence to show that, like, from the fucking drudgery of like wage labor and shit, like, there's all sorts of tinker and being. Let us finish this clip of this Pentagon spokesperson.
Yeah, did you want to go to the right to the next? All right, I lost you entirely for a second there, but I think we're good to go.
Okay, that was weird. I lost you again.
Yeah.
Moving on. Let's try and move through this so that we.
Yeah. Let's see.
Now we're drawn from WION, which is like, I think it's out of India. Because I was on their website and it seemed to be very focused on South Asia and India. But I'm not sure.
Okay. No problem.
They're like global.
The Nimitz is leading a carrier strike group that entered the South China Sea 2 weeks ago. Its presence riles China, which claims historic jurisdiction over almost the entire South China Sea and sees the exercises as provocations in its backyard. Petty Officer Joel Guillen.
I mean, for the most part, it's no different than any other deployment I've been on. We're just here to move aircraft, make sure it's done safely, make sure people don't get hurt, make sure that we can operate and send aircraft up the flight deck, do what they got to do.
It's kind of fun to hear just a normal guy who's just like, yeah, we got a fucking job to do, so we do it.
I see that you included this because I think I played the first half and then skipped this section and then did the after this. But you're right. Yeah. It is good to hear from someone who's just a fucking rag. Like,
yeah,
a petty officer. What's that? An E4 or E5?
E4 to E6.
Oh, okay. Like first class, second class thing.
Yeah. Third, second, first. Yeah.
Okay. So E6 is a petty officer.
No, E4, E5, and E6 are all petty officers. Technically, E7 through E9 are also petty officers. They're just chief petty officers. So I mean, he could be anywhere in there. Let me rewind. Maybe I can see the uniform. No, he doesn't have on a regular uniform.
No,
that's bizarre.
He's in,
I've never been on a flight deck before. So.
Yeah. No, he's got to have that high vis stuff when he's dealing.
Yeah. Normally it would be on the shoulders and the lapels, but I
and that's definitely not like rosary beads. I'm sure that's like some kind of tool or something around his neck.
Yeah, and he's definitely, I mean, you don't get to talk to the press unless they clear it. So you better believe that this is probably a guy who was briefed on what he could and couldn't say, and who might even have history with speaking to the press.
Yeah, he might be a petty officer assigned to the carrier as the fucking press agent.
Yeah,
because like every military installation has a propaganda outlet and a group of people who are trained to deal with and understand the protocols for dealing with press. Just as they have legal teams for understanding like various legal issues. Yeah. Yep, it's a large organization with every kind of functional piece that a giant corporation or government would have.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So let's play the rest of this.
All right.
The group's commander, Rear Admiral Christopher Sweeney, said it was part of a U.S. commitment to uphold freedom of passage in the waters and the airspace of a region vital to global trade. Beijing has been conducting regular exercises too, and maintains a large presence of coast guards and fishing vessels far off its mainland, a source of frequent tension with its neighbors. In early January, a guided missile destroyer that is part of the same strike group as the Nimitz angered China by sailing through the sensitive Taiwan Strait. That came 2 weeks after a Chinese Navy fighter jet caused alarm by coming within 10 feet of a U.S. Air Force plane over the South China Sea. The U.S. presence in the South China Sea, a conduit for nearly $3.5 trillion worth of annual trade, has been welcomed by allies like Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, and Australia.
Yeah.
I love how the news, and I get that this woman here is just kind of like reading her script or whatever, but it's just so interesting that like it's like you know, the US is doing exercises in off the coast of China because they're worried about China like exercising its, you know, influence over its neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
Am I being fucking
No, that's not a bad reading of it.
yeah.
And like,
Yeah, please go ahead.
I was just gonna say, if you look at the Strait of Taiwan, they're talking about it's 100 miles across. I actually looked at this before. It's 100 miles across. If you look at some of the places in the U.S. that we are super protective of, because you know they're great ports. Let's see here. Measure distance. Boop. And
I don't think you brought us back up.
oh.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. So you're talking about like, you know, places, you know, like Virginia Beach and, you know, the Chesapeake Bay and all that stuff. Like, it's only 20 miles to get up this, you know, little river. And let's see, there's 100. So basically, if anyone came inside of this area, I think that, you know, we'd probably be pretty pissed about it too.
Yeah. We're talking about a fair. Can you scroll out and scroll over to the South China Sea?
Yeah, here, let me just switch the page. South China Sea. Strait of Taiwan's a bit different, but yeah. South China Sea right up in here.
Yeah, right. So the US is doing exercises here.
Yeah.
Like
Specifically right in here.
Fucking China's neighborhood. Let's see. Vietnam, Cambodia both have a bad history of US imperialism.
Mm-hmm.
Korea is still currently occupied in the South, and North Korea was like bombed to the Stone Age back in the 1950s.
Yeah.
Right? Japan's now our ally, but obviously we fucked them up and brought them to heel, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the Philippines, in our next clip, they'll mention the Philippines is right here, and they are also a former colony.
Yep.
Right. And so
not just of ours. They've had a fun and wonderful history of colonization.
Oh, absolutely. And brutalization. A lot of our most brutal tactics were developed in the war in the Philippines, like psychological warfare, certain types of torture, certain types of like booby traps and other things that like maim people but don't kill them, like just like make them crippled or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, a bunch of fucked up shit.
And that's the brilliant sort of thing where it's like, great, now he's crippled, you have to take care of him. Haha. That's worse than killing him.
But when you look at this and you see this is a relatively small area that's mostly Chinese coast.
Yeah.
And the US is like, oh my God, like your plane flew too close to our plane. It's like, but their plane is near their country.
Yeah.
And you are nowhere fucking near your country. You know what I mean? Like this whole kind of like, oh, China is fucking provoking the US by getting too close. They said their neighbors don't like their Coast Guard being out too far. It's like technically, I think under international law, it's like 12 miles. You know better. You're the
human.
It's like
12 miles is international waters. Yeah.
Right. Can you explain the difference between a blue water navy and a green water navy? Blue water just means open ocean, and green means near the coast, right?
I mean, that makes sense to me. I've never heard that term before.
Okay. It's just something that had come up. You can kind of see.
Zoomed out too far.
Oops. Don't go all the way out to the planets. We're talking about an area that's like this. It's smaller than the Great Basin, dude. Like it's smaller than like Utah,
Yeah, this is a pretty small area right here.
It's fucking tiny, dude. And so we're flying our jets in that space, and then they're flying their jets, and then it's like, oh my God, China's doing exercises.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, they might be doing training in their own fucking neighborhood. Why are we doing training in their neighborhood?
In their neighborhood.
And the reality is because we want to go to war with them, and it will happen. If they want to go to war with them, they will.
Yeah. There's nothing we can do. There's no amount of voting that'll stop it, because we already authorized them to have the right to declare war.
Yeah, the best thing you could do is start prepping the young people, young men especially, but young women as well in your life, and tell them to start going to some like weird, like crunchy granola hippie church that preaches fucking pacifism. Seriously, like be like, I've been going to this church for fucking 2 years before you started the draft.
Yeah. You can't draft me. I'm a pacifist.
Oh, dude, and I could see some crazy shit. I think I mentioned to you I've been reading that American Midnight book about the U.S. during World War One, and how like there were like right-wing vigilantes that were empowered by the state to go around and like beat people up and for talking shit about the war and stuff like that. I could see that happening again.
That sounds right to me. I mean, we definitely like made it a point to berate and ostracize people who didn't want to go to war for World War II. Like that's the propaganda machine in full swing right there. It's like, hey, if anybody doesn't agree with this, like fuck up their life, like make it hard to live.
Yep. Yeah, that last clip, another real quick thing I wanted to point out is she mentioned the $3.5 trillion worth of trade that passes through that region.
Yeah.
That's why I asked about the Blue Water Navy and stuff.
Oh,
there's like
gotcha.
some military doctrine or theory that says like controlling the ocean is like, or having a superior navy is like essential to exercising state power.
Oh, absolutely. And that's been true for a very long time. And you would think with the advent of airplanes that wouldn't be true, but they have short range. So you have to have aircraft carriers, which means you still have to control the ocean.
Right. And there's a whole host of other reasons why a navy is superior to an air force for a lot of reasons. It can be out much longer, right? You said range, but I just mean even just like their ability to project violence, because that's what a military does, right?
Yeah, we do. I mean, yeah, that's what they do.
Its ability to do violence and be away from port or installation. Like
right.
Planes have like aerial refueling capacities and stuff. They don't normally do that, I think, with fighters a whole lot. I mean, they practice it, but like it's really not practical to try and, I mean, they do when they move fighters, right? Like, so when a fighter squadron is getting deployed to like the Middle East or something, like they will fly them over there with aerial refueling stops.
Right.
But generally speaking, you're not going to use that as your primary means of projecting your force long distance, because it's too costly and logistically it's cumbersome, right?
And that's why we have a shit ton of bases in this area, you know.
Right. And as we'll see in the clip after this one, we're doing precisely that. Let's play this clip. This guy is one of the things that scares me the most, is people that think like this motherfucker.
Listen, they Forbes. Thank you, Forbes, for
scaring
the shit out of us.
Brady, I'm here with Gordon Chang, who is, of course, a noted author, China expert, senior fellow at the Gatestone Institute.
I did not get queued up properly.
You're fine. It introduced the guy for us. I don't really care his name. He's
Gordon,
a fucking neocon.
I'm sitting here thinking, what does this say about the mindset of Xi Jinping and just the administration in general about U.S. relations and its relationship with the world?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think it shows the mentality of the Chinese. They're really arrogant. They think they can get away with this. The this is not the first incident with a Chinese surveillance balloon that we have learned. They've disclosed that there were several of these over the last couple of years, which means that in a similar situation, the United States decided not to take measures because otherwise we would have heard about it. So I guess the Chinese felt that they could violate our sovereignty, they can commit an act of war, and we won't do anything. And that really makes Chinese mentality really dangerous right now. I'm not saying that Beijing is correct in its assessment of our lack of political will, but the point is, it doesn't matter what's correct or not. What matters is what the Chinese think. And right now, they have the mentality of a regime that's going to go to war.
So you see this in some ways, if we were to see it as a test of sorts.
Was just that much. Is that? Am I like in this space where like I see how fucking bad this is? Like,
in what way? I mean
everything that guy said was an absolute fucking. It's just the fucking balls on that motherfucker to be like, China knows that they can walk all over us, like. Right? Am I reading what he said correctly?
No, you're reading what he said correctly. It doesn't have historical accuracy. Like, China tends to just do China stuff and then try to trade with people and give them pretty good autonomy and just be like, y'all want to trade? Cool.
Yeah.
Like, you need protection? Cool.
Yeah, I actually was looking up some other stuff on that WION.
Okay.
When I went to their website to try and figure out where they were from, where their money comes from, and all that stuff, doing my due diligence, of course, right?
Yeah.
To identify my sources. And actually, they were one of their articles in there because they talk a lot about South Asia. Like I said, they have a whole section on South Asia. They were mentioning that China, like I guess Sri Lanka, borrowed a bunch of money to build like an airport and some other infrastructure, like major infrastructure. And the IMF's portion was like, okay, you're going to have to like reduce your debt loads, or you're going to have to cut some social services. And China's like, you will not pay us any interest and we will postpone. You don't have to make a single payment for 2 years and then we'll reassess.
Yeah.
Because China's doing that in fucking Africa too. And it's part of the reason like the US is and US media and business community has been doing this where they're like, oh, China's evil. They're manipulating people because they don't want to see a country that uses its capital and is trying to develop other countries because it has an actual program for long-term prosperity, which is their Belt and Road Initiative, and like trying to build the infrastructure to connect the region that they occupy, right? Mm-hmm. They're not in the North Atlantic, right? Yeah. No, you're talking about fucking China to Africa, which is not very far. It's like East Asia to Africa, right? Like,
yeah.
I mean, it's fucking far, don't get me wrong, but like it's still within the realm of a fucking boat trip, right? A fairly easy one at that. Once you get out of the island chains and shit past Indonesia, it's fucking basically just across the Indian Ocean. But at any rate, like, yeah, yeah, I saw that headline about them forgiving debt and all of this comes through, but this guy is just like, it's a provocation and they know that the US is not going to respond. And like, it's just, I don't want to use the word provocative. It's bellicose for sure, but it's just like couched in this kind of like assertiveness that like what I'm saying is fact, right? Like China's walking all over us, right? Like because we're not, and it's an act of war that their fucking weather balloon
got out of control
or spy balloon or whatever is
graced our airspace.
Yeah, barely grazed it. Yeah, and it's either not even in our airspace or barely in our airspace. And this guy's talking like we're just fucking getting cucked by China. Right?
Like, I'm pretty sure that he would have loved to use that term because that would have been a triggering word for the people that he's actually trying to impress.
Yeah, did you move on from that clip?
I can go back to it.
No. It just looked like he had a red trucker Save America hat on his shelf.
Oh,
which isn't that Trump's 2024 slogan? See that hat above the clock?
So you see.
Yep, Save America.
Yeah, dude.
Trust this guy. He's got
not
fair
saying
and balanced.
Someone who likes Trump is not, but remember, Trump was notoriously fucking anti-China, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We just mentioned a few weeks back that I was listening to some economic analysts saying that like the whole fucking situation in American ports, they all got fucked up because of the Trump tariffs.
Yeah. And then not enough people wanting to actually go back to work and risk COVID too. I mean, we're long past the point where I think most people are concerned with it, but like that was a lot of why the port of like LA was backed up.
Well, and that's what surprised me about hearing that guy say that thing, because that he said was relatively minor.
Yeah.
The big one was the fact that you just like eliminated major volumes of trade, and like so boats have to like figure out how to like the shipping companies are now having to change routes and shit.
Yeah.
So that because you had like the boat, I'm sure the profit margins are not fantastic. Like you have to have a fairly intelligently planned route to be profitable.
And a lot of that is due to the massive amount of insurance is required for shipping things overseas.
Yeah.
Because we lose ships all the time.
Yeah, so that's definitely a fucking Save America hat. Or maybe it's a MAGA hat. No, that looks...
Oh, it's a Save Am or Saw Am. I'm pretty sure it's Save America.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we can't see exactly what it says, but it sure as shit looks like a red fucking Save America trucker hat.
Yeah.
I'm going with it. And also, is that like a cocktail shaker on his middle shelf? Let's figure out who this prick is. He's no stranger to hats, because like right by his neck, there's two more on top of books.
And hats.
Why do you need so many hats?
Yeah, that's definitely Save America. There's no getting around that.
Yeah. Anyway, which is not to use a logical fallacy and say because he has a fucking Trump hat that he's some fucking lunatic.
No, not that he's a lunatic, but that he has a certain agenda.
Yeah,
it's not unfair to say that someone who agrees with Trump's policies probably has a certain agenda.
Which is also not to say that Joe Biden also doesn't want to fucking wage a bunch of wars.
As long as it makes his friends money, I'm sure he's happy with it.
That's right. Let's do this last clip and wrap it up.
Good.
All right, Leo, we'll change gears for this next story then and head to the United States, where the military is very close to acquiring some new bases in Asia. So why don't you tell us where these bases are and why this is so important for Washington?
Yeah, Erin, according to the Washington Post, the US are, as you say, poised to secure new bases in the Philippines. Key bases. In fact, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin is in Manila at the moment. An announcement on the acquisition is expected as early as this week. Australia. The Philippines was once, of course, a US territory, and they've always had very close ties with Washington. They had bases there until 1991, in fact, until they closed. But now it looks like that partnership is going to resume. And why? According to the Wall Street Journal, it's to counter China and China's growing influence in the area. It comes at a time of increasing political tension between the two nations. It's important to note that the US won't have one big base. It will be several smaller bases. It's thought that is to more appease China and to kind of avoid an escalation with Beijing. It also puts the Philippines...
Yeah.
A couple things. One, we're going to make a bunch of small bases to appease China, or maybe make it a lot harder to fucking get rid of them.
Right. Exactly.
Right, spread them out so you can't just fucking...
The first thing my mind went to when he said a lot of smaller bases was strategic. I like that.
Well, yeah, because if you had it all concentrated in one area, a single fucking nuke would fucking wipe out your whole force.
Yeah.
Or just potentially wipe out your whole force.
Yeah. Or even just, some carpet bombing with conventional. weaponry.
My favorite statement, and again, this guy is reading. There's a couple things about this guy. If you see at his belt, his shirt is like tucked into his belt, but not his pants. His tie is crooked, and he has this kind of like wide eye, kind of like deer in headlights look on his face.
What am I reading here? His whole body.
Well, also like I kind of identify with him because he fucking dresses poorly and has a round face with a beard.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that they told him he had to put a tie on, and he's like, I haven't done that in like 8 years. I don't know what I'm doing.
I don't understand a skinny tie on a big dude. I guess I don't know. Makes him look taller. At any rate, he said,
"Why are you judging his looks, brah?"
I just thought it was funny because it's like, yeah, I don't know. It's there. He's obviously from the UK or something, and it's France 24, which is like obviously a international news organization, just like RT was and the BBC is, and all that other stuff. But I did want to point out he mentioned in here, he's like, and the US is going to put these bases in the Philippines as a counter to China, who is thought to believe to be getting stronger or asserting itself in the area. We just looked at your fucking map, dude.
Yeah.
Like, we're talking about like less than the distance from my house to fucking Denver, Colorado. Right?
Yeah.
A third of the United States, east to west.
Yeah.
Right? We're talking about that distance, and the US is putting bases to counter China's relevance in the region. It's their fucking neighborhood.
Yeah, yeah.
We got to counter China because, you know, they're getting really uppity with having an extra Coast Guard patrol in the shallow waters, literally like fucking 30 miles from their fucking coastline.
I mean, the Philippines is less than 1 California tall from China.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So from Mexico to the Oregon border is further than it is from China to the Philippines.
Yeah.
So why? Of course, we know why, right? They said $3.5 trillion worth of trade passes through there, and the U.S. owns a bunch of China owns a bunch of U.S. debt, and
goddamn piece of that,
and et cetera, so forth, and we just can't stomach that someone else might fucking not fucking bend the knee, right?
It's very annoying. I mean, I just want them to capitulate entirely and give me everything I'm asking for. Is that too much to ask for?
It is too much to ask for. It's going to wind like China's also a nuclear power, just like Russia.
Yeah.
Like,
let us not forget.
Let us not forget we're building bases right off the coast to counter their growth in power in the region.
Well, and this is just so much more egregious than even what's going on in fucking Ukraine. Like there, at least we're just like, hey, could you fight this war on our behalf? That'd be lovely. You know, here we're just like, no. These are our bases. We own them. It's going to have our shit on it. You know, we're not even, you know, equipping, the Philippines with our stuff. It's still our stuff. We're not giving it or leasing it or anything. And these are our bases. They're U.S. soil now.
Yeah. And so, like all of the stuff we're pointing out, meeting with Australian military officials, right? Meeting with officials in the Philippines, talking about moving bases there. All of these exercises, essentially right off fucking China's coast. Like all of these things are happening. And so to me, it boggles my mind when a balloon at 60,000 feet, maybe barely inside our airspace, but not capable of providing any additional information that their satellites aren't already providing, is being painted as a fucking act of war. Who is provoking a fucking war in this situation?
Yep.
Oh, and it's not just us that are reading these signs and seeing these various seemingly disparate things from big lie headlines bombarding you, spy balloon, to meeting with Australian officials and Philippines officials and moving bases there and all these exercises and shit. All of that to us says, oh shit, we're fucking getting ready to start a war. That guy in the Forbes clip said the opposite, right? Like China looks like they want to go to war with us because there's a balloon at 60,000 feet.
Yeah, let's start telling the lie right now. China's the one going to war, not us.
Right. Now, continue this clip.
Yeah.
Because another military
in a bit of a precarious position because they've always had close ties to the US, but China is one of their biggest trading partners.
So what impact do you think, Leo, that this could have moving forward on relations between US and China?
Well, according to the Washington Post, and this general in particular, it could have a very big impact. This is General Michael A. Minahan. He oversees the Air Force's fleet of transport. He says war between the US and China is possible as early as 2025. What he says is the elections in Taiwan and in the US in 2024, both taking place next year, could play a key impact. It all comes from a memo that's not due to be published for a couple of days, but that's been leaked. He encourages US troops to get ready for war. If we look at the Chinese press, this is the South China Morning Post. Chinese analysts say something similar. They say the US are gearing up for war over Taiwan as both sides have increased their deterrence capabilities as of late.
Yeah.
Yep, that's the US.
So let's all vote for not war. Oh wait, we can't vote for not war because everyone wants fucking war apparently.
The non-war party, I don't know, man. I'm not going to do electoral politics, and I keep going into these spaces that talk about kind of visionary politics and stuff, and I stick around because they get it right sometimes, but man, does everybody get sucked into talking about fucking elections. And I'm like, it does not matter, like, but if there was a time for like a breakaway anti-war candidate movement thing, it would be 2024. And that's to say that nukes don't get used before then. Because we're really, really fucking close in Europe.
Yeah.
We're really close. So it may not matter if there's a pro-peace candidate, right?
I mean, the candidate, yeah. I don't want the world to blow up.
Neither do I, man. I just want to fucking drink and smoke weed and fuck.
Drink and smoke weed, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We just want to be humans and enjoy our lives.
Yeah.
Enjoy the finer things in life, like
die when we're like 70 to 80.
What's that?
With plastic bottle. I said die when we're like 70 to 80 and our penises don't work anymore.
What's his fucking name? Tyrion Lannister has two of the best fucking quotes.
I want that fucking shirt so bad.
More or less me. Like that's what I do. I drink and I know stuff. Like that. Yep. That summarizes me like too well, I think.
Yeah.
And the other one is when he's like, when it's pretty early. I think it might be the first season or second season when he meets the like hill folk or whatever.
Yeah.
Brings to the battle. They're like, how do you want to die, small man, or whatever? And he's like, at the age of 80 with a woman's cock around, or in my own bed with a woman's cock around, or my mouth around my cock.
Yeah.
Remember they fucking busted up laughing. And that's how he wins them over. It's like, how do we all want to die? Like, right?
Yeah.
Comfortable?
Oh no. I had a heart attack as I orgasmed.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So at any rate, like I think we're done, and we ran longer than the hour I wanted to, and that's fine.
Significantly. You listed like 10 links.
I know,
what am I supposed to do with that?
I think it's really important that we're thorough, because I get tired of seeing people who talk about this issue that don't really understand it all that well.
Yeah.
And then all they do is bark, 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 U.S. empire, capitalist this, capitalist that. And all of that is fucking true. But like, you can provide some additional context, right? Like, we can try to inspire in people to use critical thinking skills and not be like, oh, what are these people that I like saying now so that I know what to think? Right. That's why we have this dork talking about fucking weather balloons.
Frontal lobe, use it.
Right. And also piecing it all together to show that, like, it's not just, I mean, if you look at the headlines and you're like, oh my God, there's a spy balloon, like, nobody I suspect that would watch this would think that, but like, recognize that pattern when you see a term used over and over and over and over again. And when I first tried to find the statement from China, I typed in China's statement on balloon or something like that into the search result. I had to go down 10 or 12 videos before I found something even remotely close to what I was looking for, because all of it is US or China spy balloon, China spy balloon, China spy balloon.
Right.
Watch live now as we track the spy balloon, and it's not a fucking spy balloon, dude. I mean,
and that immediately throws it out as a good source, because they're jumping to conclusions based on the time. Like, that's the thing. We might have a 24-hour news cycle, but like, information doesn't get updated that fast.
Right.
And so they're just like, let's glom onto an idea and fucking run with it.
Yeah, and it's very repetitive, and they keep saying over and over, and then they start speculating, right? Because they need to fill airtime.
Yep.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe China is like, I saw some shit. People are like, balloons would be a perfect EMP delivery device. Is China putting an EMP over the US? I guess we'll find out.
Do they have any idea what it takes to generate an electromagnetic pulse?
Probably more than it's going to be in a fucking balloon.
So far, the only way we figured out how to do it is with nukes.
Right.
And those things weigh too much for a balloon to carry. Like, most of the weather balloons are carrying, I think it's like less than 10 kilograms of payload.
Right. And it's just,
they're fucking balloons.
You can look at it and it's a very large balloon, but how much space it doesn't need for gas to get to 60,000 feet? I think a lot. Are you looking it up?
Let's see how much payload it can carry. 12 pounds.
12 pounds isn't even on a conventional single phase fission weapon.
Yeah,
12 pounds is more than the fucking explosives used to initiate the reaction.
Yeah. 12 pounds, people. Calm your tits.
Calm your Hakuna your tatas, people. Hakuna your tatas. It is not a fucking act of war. It's probably very likely a weather balloon, but the news cycle is trying to distract from something, probably a couple of things. One, the fact that Ukraine is losing and we're going to have to provoke a nuclear war if we actually want them to win. And the fact that we want to fucking fight China, and the fact that Israel is already fucking bombing Iran, as I understand. So that sounds like at least 3 fronts. How many fronts does it take to make a world war?
I mean, I think World War
The
I
Germans only had 2, right?
Yeah.
They were in North Africa too.
Yeah. It's like 2 or 3. Doesn't take much. It takes treaties and trigger responses. That's what got us into both world wars. Was like, we have a treaty with these people, and if you attack us, they have to attack, and if not, then they're violating their treaty, and they don't want to violate their treaty, so they're going to come to war with us. There's a great series of triggers that basically led the world, which of course is not the world, it's Europe, into wars.
Well, I mean, we have NATO as a treaty alliance, right? And then also, I heard, and we'll have to maybe check in on our next Monday show or something, that the U.S. is weighing or has already made a decision to send longer range rockets. Like, they've been very careful to send only short range rockets.
Right.
And they're starting to send longer range rockets, and also starting to use rhetoric like we're going to fucking take the Crimea back, which, as we've discussed a number of times here, would eliminate Russia's access to the sea, basically.
I don't think that's true. I think they just say that. It's like, I looked up Crimea, and like Russia holds territory. As far as I can tell, Russia holds territory that butts up to the Black Sea.
Right. But is it like a major port and military facility?
No, and that's the thing is it might be rough waters. It might not be a deep port.
Yeah, it might not be deep enough. The terrain might not be suitable for building a fucking port. Like
Yeah.
if it's like, like most of California's coastline is like fucking sheer cliffs and shit.
Yeah.
Like you couldn't just build a port anywhere. There's Port of Oakland is in a bay. Monterey Bay, Humboldt Bay are rather small, but supported some maritime trade, but mostly fishing vessels.
I don't know.
And
To me,
then-
it just seems like it'd be easier to make an artificial bay than to fight all these wars. Just get in there and fucking dig yourself a bay.
I mean, you could actually just, if we need to eliminate our weapon stockpiles too, you could just bomb that sheer cliff until it becomes kind of a low spot.
From so call the program Bombs to Bays.
Bombs to bays, yeah.
All right.
All right, man. So we talked about all of this shit because it sure feels to me like, like this is something the U.S. is pretty determined to do, and the preparations have begun. The propagandizing began long ago, but it's just leveled up.
Yep.
Right. What comes after? Do we get the right-wing jackbooted thugs going around fucking busting the heads of
hell yeah of anybody who
do we
opposes?
burn down Chinatowns again like we did like in communities up and down the west coast of the US? We fucking tried to get rid of the Chinese forever.
So hard. Yeah. Very hard. As
Right?
soon as
the Japanese internment, all that
as soon as they finish building the railroads anyway.
Yeah, we've treated them like shit. So are we looking at like state-sanctioned fascist militias to round up potential dissidents or anybody that speaks out against the war? Because that's what happened in like a lot of the shit that's happening in Ukraine and a lot of the kind of general vibe I'm getting from like countries talking with each other and making agreements. It feels a lot more like World War I than World War II. At least in how it's progressing towards that. And in World War I, that's when like you literally could not speak out against the war. Like, and censorship wasn't by corporations. The government actually just refused to allow most publications that they disagreed with to use the postal system. And the ISPs and the Googles and the Facebooks are the mail carriers in the digital age.
Oh yeah,
and how information moves.
And you better believe that Comcast, Spectrum, Google, they'll do whatever it takes to keep in business in the United States. If the United States says, we just want you to curtail a few freedoms, they'll be like, yeah, whatever.
100%, man. And so we're looking at fucking basically censorship and jackbooted thugs fucking smashing the heads of dissidents.
That almost sounds like something's dying.
Liberty is dying. When liberty dies, it dies.
With thunderous applause.
Have a good one, my friend, and thank you for joining us on this impromptu Friday stream to talk about balloons and Bozos manufacturing consent for the war with China. I am your host, Steve, along with my co-host, Zach. Peace the fuck out, motherfucker.
And goodbye to the person who just joined us. Rewind. Watch.
Watch it on replay. Bye.
There was a period where we disappeared. Just ignore that part.
See you, bud. Bye.